She needed money. He needed a bride. What seemed like a cold, calculated deal soon turns into something much more dangerous. Real feelings. When millionaire Mark offers Sophia a fortune to pretend to be his fiancée, she accepts, believing it will be just another piece of paper. But the game of lies takes its toll. Between glances that last longer than they should, and touches that seem all too real, the boundaries between contract and desire begin to blur. But there's a problem. The heart doesn't sign contracts, and when the truth threatens to come out, they'll both have to answer the question they've been trying to avoid all along. What happens when you fall in love with someone who should just be a lie? The silence in the marble office was interrupted by an exasperated sigh. Mark leaned back in his leather chair and massaged his temples as he stared at the man in front of him. "You need to sort this out soon," said Daniel, his lawyer and longtime friend. "Your family wants concrete proof that you're engaged before the board meeting," Mark snorted, looking out of the huge panoramic window that displayed the view of the city. He wasn't the kind of man to let himself be manipulated, but the circumstances were complicated. His grandfather, the president of the company, was threatening to leave him out of the succession if he didn't show maturity and stability, and for them, that meant having a fiancée. "So tell me, Daniel," Mark crossed his arms, "where can I get a fiancée at such short notice?" Daniel smiled, as if he already had the answer on the tip of his tongue. "You can hire one." Mark arched an eyebrow. "Are you serious?" "Yes. You need someone convincing who can fool your family long enough for you to take over the company." Mark laughed humorlessly and shook his head. "And where would I find a woman willing to do that?" Daniel slid a piece of paper across the table. "Here." Mark took the paper and read the name scribbled on it. "Sophia." "Who is she?" "A waitress. She lives in debt, works hard, but can't get out of the red. Someone who has a lot to gain from a deal like this." Mark pressed his lips together. The idea seemed absurd, but at the same time, convenient. "Have you spoken to her yet?" "No, but she'll be at the restaurant tonight. I suggest you go and have a chat." Mark sighed and picked up the paper. "That's crazy." "Maybe," Daniel smiled, "but it could work." Later that evening, Mark entered the busy restaurant. His eyes roamed the room until they stopped on her. Sophia was carrying a tray, serving a table with a kind smile. There was something different about her, something real. He waited until she was at the counter, then approached her. "Sophia?" She looked up in surprise. "Yes?" Mark looked at her for a moment before speaking. "I have a proposition for you." She frowned. "Proposal?" He leaned forward slightly. "How much is it worth to pretend to be my fiancée for a few weeks?" Shock flashed across her face. Sophia blinked, confused, as if she hadn't heard correctly. "I'm sorry. What?" Mark kept his expression serious. "You heard me. I need a temporary bride. You need money, we can help each other out." She let out a humorless laugh. "Is this some kind of prank?" "No, it's a business deal." Sophia crossed her arms, watching him. "I don't know you. You just show up here and make me an absurd offer. What makes you think I'd accept?" Mark leaned his elbows on the counter. "Your salary as a waitress doesn't cover your expenses. You work double shifts and you're still sunk in debt. I know you need money. I can pay you very well." Sophia's eyes narrowed. "Have you looked into my life? I do my homework before I make decisions." She snorted, shaking her head. "This is unbelievable." Mark took a card out of his pocket and slid it across the counter. "I'll pay you 100,000 up front, and another 100,000 when the contract is up." The silence between them became heavy. Sophia looked at the card as if it were a dangerous object. 100,000 now, that would solve everything, but... And what exactly would I have to do? Mark relaxed. He knew she was considering it. "Pretend to be my fiancée for a few weeks. Nothing more. You accompany me to events, dinners, meetings with my family. You just have to look convincing." Sophia let out an incredulous laugh. "Pretending to be a millionaire's fiancée? Sounds easy." "It's more complicated than it looks," Mark said. "But you just have to follow the rules." She stared at him for a long moment, then picked up the card and twirled it between her fingers. "I need to think." "Don't delay," Mark said. "I don't have much time." He got up and left, leaving Sophia alone with the absurd proposal that somehow seemed tantalizingly real. Mark's business card weighed more than it should have between Sophia's fingers. She stared at it as if she expected the piece of paper to give her an answer. 100,000 now, 100,000 later. It was enough money to pay off all her debts, breathe without worrying about rent arrears, and even plan a different future. But, she sighed, this wasn't just money. It was a deal with a complete stranger. Just a few weeks, she muttered to herself. That night she hardly slept. The proposal swirled around in her head, mixed with Mark's serious face and the calculating way in which he presented everything. The next day, after work, Sophia made a decision. She picked up her cell phone and entered the number on the card. The call was answered on the second ring. "I didn't think you'd call." Mark's voice came from the other end, confident. "Ma, I have questions," she said directly. "Then come to my office. We can discuss the terms of the contract in person." She hesitated for a moment. "All right." Half an hour later, Sophia entered the luxurious building where Mark's company was located. The impeccable surroundings and formally dressed staff made her waitress uniform seem out of place. At the reception desk, an elegant woman smiled. "He's waiting for you. Go on up." Sophia felt a chill in her stomach as she stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the top floor. The doors opened onto a huge office with a panoramic view of the city. Mark was standing by the window, but turned when he heard her enter. "Punctual, that's a good start." "I didn't say I'd accept." Sophia crossed her arms. Mark pointed to the chair in front of her. "But you're here, which means you're considering it." She sat down, still cautious. "I want to understand everything before I make a decision." Mark picked up a folder from the table and opened it. "Here are the terms. No physical involvement, just appearances. You accompany me to events, dinners, and family gatherings. You'll need to learn a few details about my life to make the story convincing." Sophia flipped through the pages of the contract. "And how can you be sure that your family will believe you? Because no one dares question my decisions." She arched an eyebrow. "Modest, huh?" A little smile appeared at the corner of Mark's lips. "Confident." Sophia took a deep breath and closed the folder. "I want the money up front. Half now." Mark crossed his fingers on the table, analyzing her. "Done." She blinked in surprise. "You didn't even hesitate. I always get what I want." Sophia held out her hand. "Then we have a deal." Mark shook her hand and an intense look crossed their faces. The contract was done. But neither of them imagined what was about to happen. Sophia's signature was still fresh on the contract when Mark took the folder and put it in a drawer. The deal was sealed, but the real act was just beginning. "We need to start right away," he said directly. Sophia crossed her arms. "Start how?" Mark got up from his chair and walked over to a small bar in the corner of the office. He poured himself a glass of whiskey, but didn't drink it. He just swirled the liquid around in the glass before facing her. "You need to look like a woman who would be part of my life." She snorted. "Oh, because clearly a waitress doesn't suit a millionaire." The corner of Mark's mouth lifted slightly. "You said that, not me. But if you're going to convince my family and the company board, you need to know how to behave in this world." Sophia rolled her eyes. "So you're going to turn me into a sophisticated woman?" "Exactly." She opened her mouth to retort, but Mark was already picking up the phone. "I'm going to an important event tomorrow night. You're coming with me." "You're what?" "Now?" He put his glass down on the table and stared at her. "If we're going to do this, we have to do it right. You'll be introduced as my fiancée." Sophia blinked, feeling the weight of reality fall on her. "What if I screw it up?" Mark shrugged. "Then we'll both be in trouble." She swallowed. "Good. Nothing like a little pressure to make me sleep easy." He ignored the sarcasm and dialed a number. "We need a dress for tomorrow night," he said to the person on the other end of the line. Sophia frowned. "I can choose my own clothes, you know." Mark covered the phone with his hand. You can, but you don't choose well. You're unbearable. He smiled. And you'll have to get used to it. That night, Sophia couldn't sleep a wink. Her heart was racing, her mind full of scenarios of what could go wrong. Why had she accepted this? But the answer was clear. Because she had to. The next morning, a stylist arrived with a rack of luxurious dresses. Choose one, Mark said, watching her with his arms crossed. Sophia touched the fine fabrics, uncomfortable. None of this was her world. I don't know. This one, Mark pointed to an elegant black, long and sophisticated model. It'll be perfect. Sophia sighed, picking up the dress. You always have to be in charge of everything, don't you? He gave a half smile. You'll get used to it. But what he didn't know was that he was about to get used to her too. The luxurious hall was filled with impeccably dressed guests. The sparkle of the crystal chandeliers reflected off the champagne glasses, and the music in the background created a sophisticated atmosphere. Sophia took a deep breath before entering next to Mark. He, for his part, looked perfectly at ease, as if he had always belonged there. He was dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, his expression serene, as if nothing could shake him. "Relax," he murmured, without looking at her. "Easy for you to say," Sophia whispered back, adjusting her dress. "You've done this before." Mark curved his lips slightly. "And you're doing very well." They entered together, and the gazes of the guests immediately fell on them. Sophia felt the weight of the scrutiny but kept her posture. "Mark!" An elegant blonde woman approached, casting a sharp glance at Sophia before smiling politely. "And that's—" Mark put his hand around Sophia's waist, a subtle but firm touch. "Sophia, my fiancée." Her heart raced. It felt so real. The woman arched her eyebrows. "Fiancée? You don't waste time. When you find the right person, there's no need to wait," Mark replied naturally. Sophia forced a smile. "Exactly." The woman smiled, but her eyes analyzed every detail. "So, Sophia, where did you meet?" Sophia froze for a moment. They hadn't rehearsed that part. Before she could answer, Mark intertwined his fingers in hers and smiled. "We met at a charity event. She was there helping underprivileged children. I was immediately impressed." Sophia blinked, surprised at how easily he could make up the story. The woman laughed softly. "Oh, how sweet. Well, Mark has always been selective. If he chose you, you must be special." She walked away, but Sophia noticed that other curious eyes were on them. Mark leaned close to her ear. "You're doing well." She forced a smile. "That's great. I just need to remember that I can't trip and destroy an expensive vase." Mark laughed softly. "I'd rather you didn't." Throughout the evening they greeted various guests. Sophia felt the tension in her shoulders, trying to maintain the perfect pose, until a male voice called out, "Mark!" They turned and found an older man approaching. He had an imposing presence, his eyes sharp like those of a predator. "Grandpa," Mark muttered, clenching his jaw. Sophia noticed the immediate tension in the air. Mark's grandfather looked at her with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. "So this is the woman who managed to arrest your grandson?" Sophia tried not to swallow. Mark squeezed her hand lightly and answered without hesitation. "Yes, and I expect you to treat her with respect." The silence that followed was overwhelming. Mark's grandfather's sharp gaze made Sophia feel exposed, as if he could see through the farce with a simple blink. "Treat me with respect?" His tone was slightly sarcastic. "That depends." Mark stood his ground. "Depends on what?" The old man crossed his arms, looking Sophia up and down. "It depends on who she really is." Sophia swallowed. "I'm Sophia," she said, trying to sound confident. "And I'm happy to finally meet you." Mark's grandfather raised an eyebrow. "Are you? And tell me, what did a woman like you see in my grandson?" She felt a chill run down her spine. This was a test, and she couldn't fail. "I saw a man who was intelligent, determined and loyal to his family," she replied, remaining calm. The old man laughed, a dry sound. "Nice words, but I've known Mark since he was born. He doesn't fall in love. He doesn't trust anyone. So tell me, what made you change your mind? Sophia looked at Mark, waiting for him to take control of the situation. But he didn't say anything. He just watched her, as if he was curious to know what she would say. Then she took a deep breath. Sometimes you meet someone who challenges you, makes you see things in a different way. I think that's what happened between us. The silence was tense. Mark's grandfather watched her for a few more seconds before giving a half smile. Let's see how long that lasts. He walked away, going to greet another guest. Sophia let out a discreet sigh and looked at Mark. That was awful. He tilted his head. You did well. She narrowed her eyes. And why didn't you help me? Mark smiled. Because I wanted to see how you would react. Great, she grumbled. Now your grandfather thinks I'm a fake. He thinks that of anyone who gets close to me. You're no exception. Sophia snorted, taking a glass of champagne from a passing tray. Your world is hell. Mark laughed softly. Welcome to it. The evening continued with more greetings, small talk, and subtle tests from everyone around. Sophia felt exhausted, but kept her posture, until, when they were alone for a moment, Mark surprised her. You did more than good. She blinked in surprise. Was that a compliment? He gave her a small smile. Maybe. Sophia smiled sideways. I'll write it down in the calendar. They stared at each other for a moment, and something passed between them. Something that neither of them had expected. The next few days were a game of appearances. Sophia and Mark were together at dinners, meetings, and family gatherings, and the charade seemed to work perfectly. But there was a problem that neither of them expected. The line between what was real and what was an act was beginning to blur. That evening, Mark entered the apartment where Sophia was staying, one of his own, luxurious and impersonal. How was your day? He asked casually. She frowned. Do you really want to know, or are you just practicing to look like an attentive groom? He smiled sideways. Can't I do both? Sophia let out a short laugh and crossed her arms. If you must know, it was exhausting. Your family analyzes me all the time, waiting for me to make a mistake. You haven't made any so far. She sighed. That's the worst. I have to be perfect all the time. Mark watched her for a moment, then walked over to the bar and poured 2 glasses of wine. You're doing well, you know that? Sophia arched an eyebrow. Was that another compliment? He held out a glass to her. Don't get used to it. She took the glass, watching him. You know what's funny? When I accepted this deal, I thought it would be easy. Pretending, smiling, following the script. But now, she hesitated. Mark tilted his head. Now what? Sophia looked away. Now I don't know when we're pretending and when we're being ourselves. Silence fell between them. Mark took a sip of his wine before answering. Do you think I'm the same man with everyone? She looked at him, studying his face. No. I think there's the Mark the world knows, and the one who only appears when we're alone. He smiled. And who do you think I really am? Sophia sipped her wine before answering. I don't think you even know. Mark's eyes flashed for a moment, but he kept his posture. Does it matter? At the end of the day, this is still a contract. She nodded slowly. Yes, a contract. But for the first time, that word sounded wrong. The tension in the air was palpable. Mark took a step forward, and Sophia felt her heart race. I should get some rest, she said, breaking the moment. Mark just watched her as she walked away. When the bedroom door closed, he let out a long sigh. The charade was working. But what happened when the lie started to seem too real? The engagement dinner was a grand event. The press were there, flashes went off, and guests circulated around the luxurious hall, commenting on the perfect couple. Sophia felt the weight of the farce in every smile she offered, in every toast she made, alongside Mark. But something inside her was different. She found herself looking at him more than she should, searching for signs of the man she knew behind the contract. And to her surprise, Mark seemed just as distracted by her. In the middle of the event, he held her hand more firmly than necessary. Are you all right? He asked in a low tone, just for her to hear. Sophia nodded slowly. I'm just tired. Not long now. he assured her, but his eyes said something else. She wanted to believe it. Then Mark's grandfather raised his glass and called the guests to attention. "I'd like to make a toast to my grandson and his beautiful bride." Everyone turned to them. Sophia smiled automatically, but felt a tightness in her chest. Mark has always been a difficult man to get attached to. Her grandfather continued, looking at them. "That's why, when you said you were engaged, I confess I had my doubts. But seeing you together, I realize that perhaps he's found someone to challenge him." The hall applauded. Sophia swallowed. Mark squeezed her hand lightly. "Just smile," he murmured. She forced a smile, but her mind was in chaos. Because she knew it would end, and she knew she didn't want it to end. After the toast, Mark took her to a more private corner of the room. "What's up?" he asked, noticing her expression. Sophia took a deep breath. "The contract is almost up." Mark remained silent. "I know." She bit her lip, gathering her courage. "And after that?" He looked away, as if searching for an answer he didn't know how to give. "You go back to your life, and I'll go back to mine." Sophia felt a tightness in her chest. "Is that what you want?" Mark hesitated for a second longer than he should have. "That's what we agreed." She felt her throat close up. "I see." She pulled away, but Mark held her wrist. "Sophia," she looked at him, waiting for something he didn't say. "So you did what you should have done a long time ago." "I can't go on with this," she whispered. I really got involved." Mark let her go slowly, his expression indecipherable. "Sophia." But she was already leaving, and for the first time in a long time, Mark felt like he was missing out on something that really mattered.